0544 0544 or you can also call us on 0303956641. We're also streaming live on Facebook at ZFMGH. If you're not following us, do so on Instagram, Facebook, and X at ZFMGH, and on TikTok and YouTube at Z Multimedia. This morning, we're going to have a conversation with a very important expert on mandatory ESG reporting. So mandatory ESG, I beg your pardon, reporting is coming, and are Ghanaian businesses ready or not? Now, mandatory ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance reporting, is fast approaching, and businesses worldwide are being asked not just how much profit they make, but how responsibly they operate. From investors to regulators, transparency and ethical practices are becoming non-negotiable. Now, this discussion explores whether Ghanaian businesses are ready for shifts. For this shift, we'll look at the challenges, the opportunities for growth, and investment, and what it means for the future of businesses in Ghana. Is ESG a chance to strengthen practices or a wake-up call for those unprepared? Now, there are various objectives, and we are hoping that this conversation will help Ghanaian business leaders understand what mandatory ESG reporting really means and why it is becoming unavoidable. How prepared or unprepared businesses in Ghana currently are, and some practical steps that businesses can begin taking now. Now we have here with us the group head ESG Harley Reid in the person Sima Sholatan. Good morning, Sima.
Hi, good morning.
Hope I got the name correct.
Yes, that's fine. You can just call me Sima.
Sima, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Sima, for joining us on Business Breakfast on Z this morning.
Pleasure being here.
Please help us. In terms of for ESG, how would you explain ESG reporting to a Ghanaian business owner hearing it for the first time?
Okay, great. So ESG reporting, in simple terms, right, is the process, right, for companies to use, right, to track, document, disclose their progress towards environmental, social, and governance goals. So in simple terms, to track, document, and disclose their progress towards environmental, social, and governance goals. Now, the ESG reporting process is, sorry, I'm getting the feedback.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, okay, great. So ESG reporting process is similar to corporate financial reporting, like what we all know as our annual report, right?
Right.
Every year, annually, organizations put out their annual reports. Now, regulators across the world have also demanded that we would start to have our ESG data out there as well, like the annual report. Mm-hmm. Now, the difference between ESG reporting and the annual report is ESG reporting discloses ESG metrics and information instead of accounting metrics. So let's just even sort of dissect ESG itself, right? Because then some of our viewers may not understand what that means. Absolutely. So if you take environmental metrics, for instance, right? This is information about the organization's impact on the environment. Okay. So you need to look at things around waste management, greenhouse gas emissions, and energy consumption. For social metrics or social information, right, this is focused on the company's social impact, including labor practices. So how do you treat your employees? Do you have fair wages? It also includes things like human rights policies and also your involvement in your host communities or your operating environment. And then thirdly is the governance side of it. So it's more like corporate governance metrics. Okay. So this is information about a company's governance structure and practices, including the company's leadership structure, compensation, risk management, and business ethics. So in totality, right, it provides full transparency for your stakeholders or for the organization stakeholders. These stakeholders may include your investors, your employees, your customers, your regulators, even the media as well, right, is
Right.
also a stakeholder in all of this. And then the other question most times that come back is, why is ESG reporting even important? Why should we bother? Yes, there's the compliance side to it, right? There's the voluntary side to it, but why is it important for businesses at this point in time, right?
Right.
One is that ESG reporting, like I've said previously, helps with transparency, right? So it provides this open view into a company's practice, their impact, and it provides clarity to stakeholders. Sometimes we see, some of these organizations doing great things, but sometimes until we read it, right, on pages of paper, we can't fully understand the impact that these organizations are creating, right, in their products and services, in the way they treat their suppliers, in how they handle their risk and opportunities, and how they also contribute to the economy as well. So firstly is transparency. Then
Okay.
second is it also helps to build credibility, right? And that credibility helps to foster trust, both with, even regulators, and improves reputation also for the businesses. Thirdly is what we all like, right? Is attractive. It helps also to attract investors, right? So investors these days, right, they require ESG reports or ESG data for them to make certain investing decisions. And then companies that are able to provide this data and information have access to these financing funds and and investments. And then lastly, I would say it also helps in identifying areas for improvement. So one thing we say in Harley Reid, right, is that sustainability or ESG has to be value driven, right? It has to be value driven. It has to be seen as an investment, not as a cost. And I believe as we continue to discuss today, I would create, or rather, we'll discuss how that value is being created by business using sustainability. However, it just helps with, identifying those areas for improvement, right? It
Right.
offers insight into where, companies can improve efforts, where they can set new goals, just to further understand their risk and opportunities in the business. Thank you.
Sima, I think that you've given us so much information. We can literally end the show right now, but we'll still draw a lot more from you because, especially, I mean, you listed a number of importance, and it's so amazing that if this is shared or listed out, I think that we are good to go. You've talked about, it's being open and the clarity to stakeholders. You talked about transparency. You talked about credibility, and it also fosters trust. You also mentioned that it improves the reputation of the brand, as well as attract investors when it comes to financing funds and others. And you also touched on it helping to identify areas of improvement and whether it has to be value driven and insights to set new goals for organizations or identify risks. And these are very, very amazing points that you've shared with us this morning. Now, why is ESG shifting from just a nice to have to must comply globally?
Okay, all right. That's a very interesting question. So sometimes, right, we might be under the impression that ESG compliance is nice to have.
Right.
But from 2023, right, so I would say up until 2023, that was the case, right?
Right.
Businesses could choose whether or not to adopt, these reporting standards. But the world has changed in how it is governed. Today, there are ESG frameworks that are nice to have. So we call the frameworks as the nice to have, right? And
Right.
then we have the ESG regulation standards as the must do by law. So there are still two pathways, right? The frameworks, which are the nice to have, and the regulation, which is the must do by law. So I'll give
Okay.
an example of each, right?
Okay.
So the framework, for instance, one of the popular ones we know is the global reporting initiative, which is what we call GRI. And it's voluntary, right?
Okay.
Companies can decide to use their parameters. Even SMEs, large corporations, international, companies can take the parameters and, use it to present ESG data, right?
Right.
However, when we look on the other side, right, which is the ESG regulation and standards, now these are environmental, social, and governance standards set or adopted by a government, right?
Okay.
So a company operating within that government's jurisdiction must comply with the mandatory ESG regulation. Non-compliance can lead to serious consequences, including fines, legal action, reputational issues, and there are a number of them globally, but I will want to hone in on the one that is quite important, and I believe one of the reasons why we're having this conversation today, which is the International Financial Reporting, IFRS, Sustainability Disclosure Standards. Throughout the course of our conversation, I will be using IFRS, and IFRS means International Financial Reporting Standards. And SDS means Sustainable Disclosure Standards. So I don't keep repeating those words, right? So that particular standard, the IFRS SDS, is a regulation which has been adopted by Ghana and some other African countries, and it is being enforced right now by the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Ghana, right?
Okay.
So for this, there are consequences of not reporting on it, and it has been adopted, and the ICAG, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants Ghana, have also created an adoption roadmap with mandatory reporting starting in 2027, which is a couple of months from now, about 9 months or so, from January 1st, 2027. Thank you.
Hello. Right. Thank you very much, Sima, for that information. I think that we are getting somewhere now. What does mandatory ESG reporting actually mean in practice?
Okay. So like I've explained earlier, right, the critical distinction between mandatory ESG disclosure and voluntary ESG reporting is accountability, right?
Right.
Mandatory requirements are enforceable by law, like I said, often with fines and regulatory oversight. So there's a regulatory oversight, there's a regulator that would make sure that you are reporting on it, while the voluntary frameworks are driven by market expectations, stakeholder pressure, investor demands. But often what we see is that, those voluntary ones set the stage for future regulations. Again, I think this session, right, that we're having is also an educative platform, and especially for organizations that do not know that this framework or this reporting process is coming next year. I think it will also be important for us to maybe do a little deep dive, if you do not mind, into what this IFRS SDS is all about, right?
Okay.
Okay, just a few minutes. So the IFRS SDS was issued by, the ISSB, right? The ISSB is called the International Sustainability Standards Board. And within the IFRS SDS, there are two standards which organizations must report on. So we have the IFRS S1, which is providing general sustainability related information. So standard requires companies to disclose their governance structures, their risk management processes, and strategies related to sustainability, right? It ensures that companies provide transparency on how sustainability issues impact their financial performance and overall business operations. Now, IFRS S2 is the climate-related disclosure or information. Now, this is purely climate-related, so environmental sustainability based, right? So it's focused on climate-related risk, and it requires companies to disclose how they are addressing both their transition risk, that's the risk associated with shifts towards a low carbon economy, and their physical risk resulting from direct impact of climate change, such as extreme weather conditions. Now, like I said earlier, ICAG has put out the adoption roadmap, and come 1st January 2027, organizations that called or has been termed public interest entities are supposed to start that reporting process. Now, most times people also confuse it. Is it listed companies? Is it public companies? Is it private companies? What companies are really public interest entities? And in plain terms, right, these are one, there are four of them in this category. One, listed companies or listed entities on any recognized exchange in Ghana, right? That's the first. The second is regulated non-listed entities like banks, insurance companies, corporate trustees, registered pension schemes. Those are the second set. The third are public limited companies. And then the fourth are private companies that are holding companies of public or regulated entities. So it pretty much covers, most of the organizations within, the public-private space in Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sima. So, I mean, listing all the institutions and then the standards and all that, two things come to mind: that what global developments are driving these mandatory ESG reporting, and are African and Ghanaian businesses being directly affected already?
Yeah, great. So yes, so some of the lies the word drivers for mandatory ESG reporting. I talked about some of them. Regulatory pressure. We have stakeholder demands. Stock exchanges around the world are demanding for it as well. Most stock exchanges have their ESG or sustainability disclosure requirements. If companies want to access finance from the capital market or from even investors, ESG information or data is required, and also what we call national challenges, right? We have things around high poverty rates, unemployment, social issues, climate change, pollution. All of these things right now are topics that are front burner, right, globally. And these things have been incorporated into businesses to also ensure that businesses are also responsible to address this, within their businesses. Now, are Ghanaian and African organizations are affected? Yes. We've already talked about the fact that we have the rollout coming up already in Ghana. Other countries within Africa that have adopted the IFRS SDS are Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Ivory Coast, South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Zambia. And I think there are others too, within that mix. So sustainability or ESG reporting has come to stay. What I also say with people is that the same way we take financial reporting very important, to businesses, the other reporting standard in the world globally, which we will now start taking very important, is sustainability or ESG reporting. So it's here to stay, and African businesses have to be carried along or are going along on the train as well. Thank you.
Thank you. African businesses have to be carried along. Now, when it comes to the readiness of Ghanaian businesses, in your experience, how ready are Ghanaian businesses for ESG reporting?
I would say from a recent research I saw from the Ghanaian Stock Exchange, about 53% of listed companies are now engaged in some form of sustainability reporting. So the awareness is there, there's the progress. However, there are still issues around, the rigor, the type of data that, is being put out. But at least 53%, reporting on having some form of sustainability reporting is a good enough number, at least for the starting point. So I would say we are getting ready, or we are getting there. Yeah, as well.
I love that we are getting ready and we are getting there. So, what type of businesses are more prepared? Would you say that large corporate organizations or SMEs or international firms, which kind of businesses are more prepared for ESG reporting?
Yeah, so I would say mostly the multinationals, because some of them are operating, their group office is operating in countries with very advanced reporting, processes. So mostly the multinationals are leading, followed by the large corporates. Then the SMEs, also know that SMEs have different sizes from the big to the smaller ones, right? The
Right.
smaller ones are still, I think, are still trying to sort of get their footing within sustainability reporting or ESG reporting. And that's why we, as Harley Reid, we try to create, platforms where organizations can come and get the right type of information that they require to make some of those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and also in order to improve on some of the objectives, and also touching on touching around the importance you shared, what are some of the common gaps that can be found?
So I will just speak to maybe three.
Okay.
One for us in Africa, which is really not a bad thing, right? But we just need to elevate or evolve, is that we confuse ESG with CSR, right? So,
Absolutely.
and it's very costly because we go around it like a PR or a charity exercise, glossy reports, using buzzwords, donations, which is great because CSR is part of ESG, but it sort of dilutes the whole impact of it and it leaves companies vulnerable rather than looking at ways that maybe their business operations, their services can solve some of those, issues that they're trying to solve by just donating funds, right? So firstly, I would say the gaps I see is confusing ESG with CSR. And if you go to several websites, you will see that information for yourself. The second is we treat ESG as a compliance checklist rather than it being a strategic positioning for us, right? If ESG is done right, we can unlock entirely new ways of thinking about growth, right? We can de-risk our operations, we can have access to green capital, we can identify new product opportunities, and build long-term trust for businesses. So ESG is supposed to sit at the heart of strategy. It is not a side, it's not a side thing, right? It is the business. ESG is the business, and we should view ESG that. So most times, perhaps is that we just see it as a tick box exercise. We just want to get it done, and we're not thinking about it strategically. And then thirdly is ESG data and system. We do not have, good enough data, and we are not collecting this data as well. Forward-thinking companies should treat ESG data like financial data. It should be structured, opened, auditable, decision-ready. ESG data should be used for decision. It shouldn't be sitting in some system or some platform somewhere. It should be used for business decisions. So I would say that I would focus on those three. Maybe the last one could be weak ESG governance at the board level. But I think boards these days are beginning to get a bit more aware, right?
Right.
So again, data is an issue. Just looking at it as compliance and then confusing it with CSR, I would say are the major gaps that I see for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sima. So I think that for businesses or individuals, organizations, it's important for them to be aware that this report is one of the objective is to be used for business decisions. So
Yeah.
it's not just for anything or not having any objective or any core responsibility. Now, if we want to look at some of the challenges that businesses may face, and even before we touch on that, you also said that the ESG is not CSR. It's just one aspect or an aspect of the entire ESG operation. Now, what are the biggest challenges Ghanaian businesses will encounter when ESG reporting becomes mandatory?
Yeah. Okay, so despite the progress we see, right, towards the adoption of IFRS SDS in Africa and in Ghana, some key challenges are already, very plain to see. One is limited technical capacity within the reporting entities. A lot of organizations are still grappling with, even the understanding of the expectations, right? So
Right.
if you don't even understand what you are supposed to be doing, then how do you, align appropriately? That's one. Two is the awareness. The awareness isn't there. So I've talked about the technical capacity within the organizations to be able to report on this. The awareness, I've been in rooms where, organizations, you're supposed to be reporting in a year from now, and some of them are just even hearing about it for the first time, right? So the awareness needs to be out there, and that is one thing again Harley Reid is pushing out in our various markets, right? And then thirdly is the lack of reliable sustainability related data and reporting systems. So many organizations are still in the early stages of integrating ESG considerations in their governance, in their strategy, and their risk management process, which is the core pillars of the IFRS S1, right? So there's still a lot, but I believe that with targeted capacity building, phased implementation plan, and local guidance or support, right? The gaps, the gaps would sort of close up very quickly. Because again, if we go into this mandatory reporting period with these gaps, there would be a very huge risk of undermining consistency and even comparing the results across board. And I believe that's even one reason why we have reporting in the first place, right? You want to be able to take a report from a business in insurance and a business in banking, and you still understand what, that you can compare the ESG data, or take a sustainability report from Ghana, or take one from anywhere in Europe, and you can, compare the information that they are both sharing. So we need to address those issues really as we, forge forward into 2027. Thank you.
Now, before we move on to the next question, can we dive a little bit more on the limited technical capacities as one of the challenges you listed? What should businesses look out for? What capacity are we looking at? Where can we find them?
So with capacity, especially when it comes to climate related type of disclosures, right? Those are specialist, type of areas, right? And you need to know things around how to, look at your climate risk and how to map it with your business strategy, and and all the different things that come with it. You need to be able to calculate your scope 1, your scope 2, your scope 3, emissions. I'm just even taking environment as one pillar with ESG that requires, very very huge, or like the word, very technical concentration there, right? So these are some of the areas, right? But these areas can be closed up, like I said, with the right type of training and the right type of capacity building. So if I take Harley Reid, for instance, what we do, or what we are doing currently, is we offer 2 lines of service. We have one service where we can come and sit with your organization as a consultant, and we help you, support you, put the organization through the process, right? Create an ESG strategy, ESG roadmap, and support with data collection, policies, and the implementation, and get you ready ahead of 2027. Now, we also have a second pathway, which is where we are trying to create consultants within the businesses. So we would ask, okay, select, a couple of your teams, right, within your business, maybe your sustainability team, your risk team, your finance team, right? Bring them together in a room, and we will take them through courses, right? Training programs where they start to get that capacity to be able to go and deliver for the organization. We give them tools, we give them templates, we give them projects, so that we are making sure that we are monitoring to make sure that they are implementing as they should. And we also provide mentoring as well for these individuals within the company. So there are various ways that organizations can get it. But again, there's no one size fits all. Every organization needs to decide what, is best for them. Thank you.
So I believe that Zed can call on you for training very soon.
We are happy to provide that as always.
Excellent. Now it's 9:34 a.m. and if you just tuned in, it's Business Breakfast on Z 101.9 FM, and we've been having a conversation with Sima, who is the group head ESG at Harley Reid, and we're having a conversation on mandatory ESG reporting, which is coming, and if Ghanaian businesses are ready or if we are not. So she touched on some of the importance, what ESG means, and some of the global push and Ghana's position as far as ESG is concerned. She's also listed some of the challenges and a few things to look out for. Now, Sima, let's look at some opportunities and business value. How can ESG reporting improve access to investment and partnerships?
Okay, all right. So, firstly, as I've been saying, right, ESG reporting provides standardized, verifiable data, right, that helps investors to compare performance across companies and industries. So, firstly, I think one that I've been speaking about is building of trust and transparency, right? Transparency fosters trust. It helps to build long-term relationship with investors who value openness and responsibility. So, for instance, a recent survey I saw by EY revealed that 83% of global investors consider ESG disclosure critical to their investment decisions. 83%. That is a huge number, right? For global investors to consider in making those investment decisions, right? So that's number one, right? Number two is alignment with investor values, right? So environmental awareness alongside social responsibility continues to become prominent in with investors as they seek, to align their portfolio with organizations that, prioritize these types of values. So ESG reporting makes businesses to communicate their initiatives that resonate with these environmental and social priorities of investors. Thirdly, I would say is risk mitigation, right?
Okay.
Also, a report that I saw recently also shows that companies following robust ESG practices are perceived as more resilient during economic downturns. And we saw this during COVID. Organizations that had, very strong ESG practices, didn't have most of the issues, that organizations suffered during COVID. And so they become attractive options for risk-averse investors. I don't think that any organization would want to, or any investor would want to invest in a company that would have scandals tomorrow, that would have issues of, mismanagement or reputational issues. Because once that happens, share prices starts to tank, right? There's a risk of losing their investments. So these are the reasons why investors look very, intensely at these different parameters in making sure that organizations these days, right, or organizations now have these types of, structures, processes, programs, outlook to them before they can invest in them. So these are just a few, of some of the, ways that ESG can improve access to investments and partnership.
And I think I've given us very strong, very strong reasons on how ESG reporting can improve access to investments, especially when you connected it with COVID and how firms with more resilient, who are more resilient, firms who practice ESG are more resilient during economic downturns. And I think that COVID is a very good example. We don't know what will happen tomorrow, and these are some of the ways that can protect the firms. Now, can ESG, even though you talked about trust, you talked about transparency, can ESG strengthen brand trust and competitiveness for Ghanaian businesses? And are there any examples, whether local or international, where ESG created real business value?
Yeah. So one area that we usually see ESG coming here when it comes to competitiveness is around cost reduction and operational efficiency, right?
Right.
If I take an example, like transitioning to renewable energy sources can lower energy costs tremendously, right? Sustainable production practices can lower the expense of waste management, and optimizing supply chains through ESG principles can also improve efficiency and reduce resource consumption. So we've seen whereby, organizations that integrated ESG were able to save up to 20%, right? They started having up to 20% cost savings, and this boosted their profitability and freed up more resources for expansion and innovation. For reputation for the brand, right? So we're talking about brand trust and all of that. ESG plays a huge role as well to enhance reputation, right? By showcasing responsible business practices. This commitment, it resonates with customers strongly, and this drives revenue growth and improves loyalty, right? So when we start to look at organizations that are case studies of how ESG improves or has improved their business, I would take two. One is Microsoft. We all know Microsoft.
Yes.
And apologies, I'm not going to mention an African brand so that it doesn't seem like I'm marketing or demarketing.
Okay.
So I would take foreign brands that may not necessarily be, marketing at this point in time. So I would take Microsoft, right? So Microsoft is a leader in sustainable technology, right? And they are well known for their innovative technology and their commitment to sustainability. In 2020, they had committed to become carbon negative by 2030. And so they invested heavily in renewable energy projects to achieve this goal. So they did a lot of investment. And what's the result today? The result today is that ESG effort has reduced, one, their carbon footprint, it has increased their energy efficiency, and it has decreased their waste generation. And the company, through that green plan, has reported a $10 billion increase in sales due to that ESG initiative. That is just, facts and figures. It is not theory, right? It's not theoretical, it's facts and figures. We also know another brand, Tesla, right? Tesla was built on the foundation of sustainability. So today, Elon Musk is one of the richest men in the world. His entire brand of who he is was built on sustainability, right?
Absolutely.
Why did Tesla come about? For conservation and reducing the use of fossil fuels, which is what we know as our petrol or our diesel, right? So they pioneered electric cars, as we know, and this helps with emission reduction, renewable energy integration, and also responsible sourcing. So these are simple examples that everyone knows of. I don't need to call any complex example that everyone know of that sustainability and ESG can help companies achieve and drive. Thank you.
I mean, with these examples, are you giving us like a tip or a tidbit on how to be a billionaire or how to be a successful business? Because for one of the key things you noted for Microsoft, well, it helps decrease the waste generation, and for Tesla, it being built on sustainability. And I think that ESG is the future, and
Exactly.
I think that it's a key thing for all businesses to note that as part of the foundation for every business, they have to also look at incorporating ESG in their operations. And I mean, I think it's a very strong key. We've seen the key. Thanks for revealing it to us. So now, I mean, let's look at the role of leadership and governance. Now, what role must CEOs and boards play in ESG readiness?
Yeah. This is one question too that we tend to get as well. What's the role of leadership, especially corporate leadership in ESG, and also to get the organizations ready? So the role of board in overseeing ESG initiatives really is more of oversight, right? The board, the CEO, they're not involved in the day-to-day running of the organization. However, their role is to ensure that ESG or sustainability considerations are embedded in the business, in all spheres of the business, in all spheres of governance, from strategy to decision making, to risk management and reporting, right? They must ensure that these ESG principles and frameworks are well understood across the organization. It shouldn't be a task of a sustainability unit or risk unit sitting somewhere. It should start from the top. These days too, you would see some boards, right? The way you have audit committee, risk committee within boards. You also see sustainability or ESG committees within those boards. Boards are beginning to take notice of it. However, I feel, a lot more still needs to be done, right? If organizations, for instance, listening, things that they can focus on if they haven't started, right, is, make sure that there's an ESG strategy or there are policies to guide them. It shouldn't be free flowing, right? They should ensure that, there's oversight around their risk, ESG risk. There's accountability, right? There's the corporate culture. The tone from the top is always very important. Once everyone within an organization sees that the tone at the top is committed to ESG, you would find the same across the business.
Okay.
Stakeholder engagement, transparent stakeholder engagement needs to be, top on their mind, and also collaboration with external experts. Where you are in doubt, where you don't have the capacity and the capability, they should engage, external experts. And one thing I always say to when I speak to organizations is, before you even start your ESG journey, let's have a conversation with your board. Let's have a conversation with your executive team. If they are not on board, if they don't understand what ESG is, it's going to seem like a burden, for the institution to implement it. So that awareness, that, buy-in, that taking charge of it is very important for that level within the organization. And once they take charge, once they are responsible, feel fully responsible for it, you would see that ESG becomes almost a culture, and there's that mind shift within the business. So that would be my thoughts on and my suggestions on that. Thank
Okay.
you.
Now, Sima, a little birdie told us the governance, I mean, ESG, the G referring to governance, and that governance is often the weakest, even though it is most important ESG pillar. Can you tell us why that's the case, if it's true?
It depends on the organization.
Okay.
If you have an organization with strong corporate governance, governance will not be the weakest. That's my view on that. Most times, if I take the African example, I would say maybe sometimes E is the weakest. Sometimes by the time we start to run with ESG, we forget the S. So it's situational, right?
Right.
I don't think that governance is often the weakest really when it comes to ESG. It just depends on the organization. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then with that, so how can leadership mindset determine success or failure of ESG?
Yeah, so like I had just explained, right? Once leadership is on board, everyone is on board, and then you would see success. If leadership is not on board, everyone takes it as just one of those things, a tick box exercise, and you will see the failure of it.
So leadership must be on board. Now, if you want to share, if you're a listener, I beg your pardon, if you're a listener, you want to share questions, you have comments also that you want to share, please do that on WhatsApp 054432 1019 0544 If you want to call, our call lines are open 0303 956641. 0303 We have an ESG expert live on Z101.9 FM, and this is Business Breakfast on Z, your number one business morning show. Now back to you, Sima. On some practical, let's look at some practical steps for businesses. If a business wants to start preparing today, where should it begin as far as ESG is concerned?
Okay, so I think I've talked about the firsts already,
Yeah,
and I'm not going to really focus on that now, which is the
absolutely.
awareness and building capacity. But from a practical standpoint, right, I would say, first of all, the organization needs to identify its key ESG drivers. Every organization is unique in its own way. Most times there, you don't have a one size fits all. You also have the local nuances as well. So the organization needs to understand the key drivers for its business or key ESG drivers and prioritize them. You can't be everything. You can't address everything at the same time. That is why we talk about prioritization. In a more technical term, we say conduct a materiality assessment to understand what you should focus on, and what your stakeholders would want you to focus on. Now, these drivers as well is also your type of industry. So in financial services companies, ESG drivers sometimes or most times will be different from a digital or a telecoms or a technology-based company. So understand and identify these key ESG drivers for your company. Get guidance, especially when you're starting out, so that you get it right the first time. So you don't grapple in the dark. So
Right.
get guidance,
Right.
seek help, consultants, they can come in and help you with that. The third is integrate ESG into your business strategy. ESG should not be a standalone. It should be used as, it should be part of your business strategy, right? I've seen organizations use it as business strategy and you see their core values, their mission, their visions, even the types of products and services that they produce changing and helping the business to grow. Set your ESG goals as the next step. You need to have your plan, you need to have your targets. You cannot report what you don't measure, right? You need to know, where do I want to be in the next 5 years? Most times you see this around emissions. So most times organizations have emissions targets or other goals. So you must have your goals and your targets, and then create your action plan to achieve these goals. Action plans evolve as well as the organization evolves. So this will be my step, quite clear.
Okay.
Know your
Okay.
drivers, get help, integrate ESG into your business strategy, set your goals and create your action plan and start implementing.
Excellent. Now, I mean, you mentioned earlier that the multinationals and large corporates are more prepared. Now, would you say that SMEs can also follow the same steps, or there are some low cost to no cost steps they can take?
Yeah. So I would like to focus on the low cost, no cost
Okay.
steps for SMEs, because obviously the bigger SMEs will be able to, right, deal, maybe pay, for some of these services to get the required support that they need.
Okay.
For low cost, no cost, I would say for the SMEs, start by getting educated. I keep hammering on that.
Right.
You need to know, right? The second is, start with governance and ownership. Assign clear responsibility for sustainability, all the way to sustainability reporting. Who has oversight? Just set that first of all within the business, right? Then you can do a lightweight materiality assessment. What is important to you at this time? Have your plan or an ESG roadmap. Look at your existing data and start putting those data together. Start gathering them, right? And you just keep improving from there until maybe when you are able to get the right support that you need. Also, I would also like to add here that, again, these SMEs, right, that are out there, and I get a lot of questions from SMEs, try to, even if you don't have the financing or funding, maybe to get in external help, or even just reach out to these organizations that can help, right, and see what you can even, arrange with them, right? See what you can arrange with them. You might be surprised that you get the required support that you need without having to break the bank. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have two texts on our WhatsApp number, and I feel they're related to what we just. But let me just share it in case there's something else you want to share with them. So this is from Eugene. Eugene from Tema. He says, "This ESG matter, does it concern small businesses like us, or it's only for big companies?" And I think Louisa also had similar question. I have a small shop and just few workers. Does ESG still apply to me? Sima, do you want to?
So any company, right, can put in ESG, practices, but I believe their question is more around the mandatory reporting, right?
No,
Yes,
so their question, because they are for small businesses. They are asking if
yeah.
ESG concerns them as small businesses, and then the second one is asking if that she also has a small shop. Does ESG apply to her?
Well, I haven't seen the roadmap for SMEs for mandatory adoption for Ghana.
Okay.
Unlike Nigeria, where we have our adoption roadmap for SMEs for 2030. But I believe that having a small shop is more like an MSME, right? And that's a micro, right? And there are still things that you can do within, your space maybe not necessarily mandatory reporting, right? But there are still things you can do within your space to help your business. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So let me check if there are any more questions. Okay, I think that's what we have for now. Please keep your comments. Keep sharing your comments, your questions. We want to hear from you. Have you heard of ESG reporting before? Do you know about ESG reporting? Please, we want to know where you're listening from. We want to know what your questions are. Do you have any? I mean, if you have a business, do you have any question? Do you have any comments? Please share with us. Or if you are practicing ESG in any way, please do let us know. Sima, so let's look at some of the actions moving forward. Let's look ahead. What happens to businesses if they ignore ESG reporting altogether? I think you mentioned one, but just mention buttress on it a little bit more for us.
Yeah. So the same way we've been talking about the benefits, right, of ESG, the reverse is also the case. If you ignore it, the world is moving forward. I've said this over and over again on this call. Even if you are operating in Ghana today, tomorrow, maybe you may have an investor coming into Ghana and is looking for a partnership, and you do not want to be excluded from such types of opportunities because you are not, doing the right thing, right? And it could vary. It could vary. So the way we have the good, let's just turn it around to say, if you ignore, these are the things, you would lose out, right? You would lose out.
Right.
You would lose out not just on investment, you would lose out on the benefits it can bring to your business. You would lose out on, on other things. If you're also a business within the country that is planning to go to other jurisdiction, you want to maybe expand to even other African countries. You want to go to the capital market, for instance, to list your company. These are the questions that will be asked. Where is your ESG data? You cannot be seen not to have it. And the world is moving forward, right? The world is evolving. You cannot also be seen as not being, in line with what the expectations are globally, right? So for me, I don't think that any organization at this point can totally, ignore. You would have to do something one way or the other, right? Again, there's something I want to add here, that sometimes organizations see it as a huge cost. Oh, this ESG thing is coming. But when we sit with those organizations, we most times find out that they already have ESG going on in one form or the other. Just because they don't have the right knowledge, they're not able to consolidate it together and make it a whole, right? That sometimes is the issue. So there is no ignoring it. We're already doing it one way or the other. We have to do it. We are in a global world. We need it for our businesses to grow as well, and we need it to continue to be responsible organizations within the business space. Thank you.
Okay. We're just about wrapping up the show. Before we share a last word, there's another question from Mike at East Legon. He says, apart from getting funding and investors, what other benefits do I get from this ESG thing? I don't know the relevance of this question, but is this something that you want to touch on?
Yeah. So we've talked about operational improvements, right? We've talked about cost reduction, be it your production costs. We've talked about the fact that you can reduce your energy efficiency or improve your energy efficiency. All of those things reduce costs.
Right.
That's and help with operational improvement. So let's forget investors that may not come to invest in your business. You are the one investing in your business, but it can help you with operational improvement as well. If you look at, let's take power, right? If you, for instance, convert to renewable energy, right? Initially, it may cost you, but again, what happens is that you would see how the benefits of it starts to come back into the business. You start to save a lot from paying for the grid, right? Because you're somewhat generating your own power, and it reduces, emissions that also you are producing into the environment. So let's just take it in that very, simple terms. Thank you.
All right, it's almost time. So, can you please share your final words with us to our cherished audience?
Yeah. So I think for me, the major thing I really want to put out there today is this reporting, IFRS S1, S2, mandatory ESG reporting is coming. We need to be ready. We don't need to see it as a burden. It shouldn't be a burden. It should rather be a catalyst for stronger governance, enhanced confidence in your business, broader market access to market as well. So let's start early. I know if I kind of feel like we are late because this is a few months to the time, but better late than never.
Yep,
so let's start with early engagement, structured planning, capacity building, strategic alignment, and let's turn this mandatory reporting for our own good, right? Let us turn it into competitive advantage for our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sima. And I feel like we need to have you on another time to get more information. I feel there's more under ESG that we need to bring out to the public. Okay, so that was Sima Sholata. I hope I got the name right.
That's fine.
And she is the group head of ESG at Harley Reid, and she's available. She's a consultant. Her team are available. If you want to know more about ESG, please reach out to her or to them, and they'll be available to help you out. Now, she shared with us on mandatory ESG reporting and if Ghanaian businesses are ready or not. And we got very unique tidbits and information. And even though I feel there's more we can get from her, and I believe that another time we'll have her on board sharing more on ESG practices. It has helped other businesses like Tesla and Microsoft, like she said earlier, and it's key to incorporate ESG in our operations, and it's coming to Ghana fully, and we need to be ready. And as a firm, it's for your good, and like I said, they're available to help and support. Now, this was Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM, your lifestyle, leisure, and business radio. And always consistency. Don't forget that consistency today is what turns effort into results tomorrow. Good morning once again. I am Ajo. Up next is The Brighter Side.
¿Cómo puede ser verdad?